CNN's chief law enforcement and intelligence analyst, Mary Ellen O'Toole, a former senior FBI profiler and former FBI special agent, and Jeremy Saland, a former Manhattan prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney. I'll begin with you, John, this evening. Mangione's perp walk. Officers usually do go to great lengths to avoid the cameras and attention. That was the opposite of what happened today. Why was this so visible?
Well, two reasons. First, the NYPD policy on this is long-running and well-worn and old-written, which is I can recite it from memory. The department neither encourages nor discourages the photographing of defendants in public areas. And that's because we, the media, have complained over the years about certain people being snuck out the back door for different reasons. So basically the policy is if he's going to be in a place where anybody else on the street could see him, and that doesn't matter who the suspect is, if the press asks, the NYPD will tell them when and where that's going to be. That's been the habit. But let's get back to reality. The SWAT team is there because they're worried about a groundswell of people who are saying we should free Luigi. So that's part of the security around it. Why is the mayor and the police commissioner there? They're there because this is allegedly a guy who tried to commit the perfect crime and get away with it and maybe commit it again. And they were there to meet those cameras after this walk and say, it's important to note, this is not the way to do this. This is not the answer. You can't kill people as a matter of protest. And if you think there's a perfect crime, we're going to show you different. You're going to face justice.
Mary Ellen, let me bring you in here because Mangione is obviously this individual. He's 26 years old. He's been handcuffed. Frankly, the charges he's facing, very, very serious. He's flanked by the officers, as John has articulated who was there and why. The question, though, is given the sympathy he seems to have garnered online and beyond, would this visual actually increase that sympathy?
Good evening. It certainly could, and it certainly could reinforce with some people that he's not being treated fairly. He's a hero. He's a revolutionary, and look how he's being treated. So it certainly could. There's no way to predict that. But as John said, that show of force, I think in a case like this, can be very powerful to let people know you're not going to break him away. You're not going to break him out of the courts, and we take this very seriously. So it is a two-edged sword.
You know, it's a good point to think about perspective and perception and what we're all seeing in this instance here. Jeremy, let me bring you in here because Mangione, as you know, is now facing cases in 2 states, also a federal case. Break this down for us, how this will go in terms of the order of things. Who would have the biggest priority? Is it New York State here, followed by Pennsylvania maybe, although those charges are much less serious compared to what's going on in New York, and the federal government is more of the backstop?
Yeah, so let's sort of work backwards here. Pennsylvania is way out in the outfield. Not to say it's not consequential or relevant, because it certainly is. But what's really important is the New York case. And I think the federal case is somewhat of a charade because they got left out of the party and they want to be a part of the action. This is a state case. You don't see the federal government pursuing domestic violence abusers who cross state lines and commit crimes and kill people, which happens, and having mayors walk behind them as well. This is really a state case. That being said, the federal government has indicated, as I understand it, that they're going to pause in time. They don't even have an indictment yet. So it's going to be hibernated or stopped briefly and back to the state, meaning New York City, and they will prosecute this homicide, this murder, and presumably, assuming it withstands a motion to dismiss before a judge, either that murder 2 or the murder 1.
You know, that's important to think about that order, and we do know that the idea of New York State, that trial, if it's set, would go before the federal. There's some advantages and disadvantages to that, and we'll play out seeing how it will go. John, Mangione's notebook, what else we learned about it in the federal complaint?
So we learned about notes that were in this spiral notebook, which was the planning book, but there's this incredible passage. This was 1.5 months. This investor conference is a true windfall. And most importantly, the message becomes self-evident. And he goes into a description of his intent to, quote, whack the CEO of the insurance company, the largest insurance company, at its investors conference. You know, what you glean from that is His message is doing it at the investors conference and killing the CEO. His message is this is the center of greed, where people are actually counting their dividends from their stock on the profits of this company. But there's something else here, which is, you know, he shows up as this hooded figure in the pre-dawn darkness with a gun and a silencer, talking about whacking people. It sounds like something out of The Sopranos. In his note, he refers to these executives as mafioso who need to be stopped. It's what Mary Ellen O'Toole would call a variation on the pseudo-commando. He had created this hitman character for himself.
Well, Mariette, how do you see those writings?
Yeah, I agree with John. And as I read through them again tonight and did an analysis of it, what I think I'm reading here is that he actually decided to commit the crime, and then he started to look for a victim. So his decision was, I want to be an assassin, a revolutionary, a hero. And then he started to go through and look for the most worthy target, because he does write in his notes that although he procrastinated, it was a good thing, and then he settled on the insurance company because they checked off all the boxes. So to me, the order of things was, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to be famous. Now I have to find a victim. Then he found the victim, and then things fell into place. And one other thing that he said, he started off saying, just to the feds, I did this by myself, which is something he probably learned from the Unabomber's manifesto, because we did struggle with that originally, thinking that the Unabomber could have had some help. And this guy wanted to make sure, no, it's all me.
I wonder what that says about his psychology, of course. And thinking about this really quick, Jeremy, he could face a death penalty if found guilty in the federal murder charge. You see that happening?
Yeah, I don't see that happening, well, for two reasons. First, it's bifurcated. Assuming he's convicted of that charge in federal court, not state court, then there'd be a second proceeding to see whether or not, assuming there's approval from the attorney general, to pursue, and ultimately that jury says, yes, we want that death penalty. We know in New York State that this is not a death penalty state, though it would be a federal charge and allow for it. The constituency or the jurors that make up that jury in federal court are the same jurors that would make up that jury in a state court. So they would have to approve it. This is not going to be a death penalty at the end of the day, but life in prison is almost, certainly not the equivalent, but sort of functional equivalent to a life wasted for this tragedy that occurred to Brian Thompson.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your analysis this evening.